So let's start today's session. Before starting, let's have a recap what we discussed on Saturday because this is going to be a continuous session from our Saturday class, right? So in Saturday we have discussed what is a function, what are the different types of function. I mean, we have discussed built-in function and a user-defined function. Then we discuss what are the advantages of a built-in function. We will see some example using built-in function, and we will discuss that there are some limitations of built-in function. That is for the purpose they are defined, only that purpose they can be used. You cannot use for your own purpose, right? If you want to implement your own functionality, then you need to go for user-defined function, right? So we have discussed what is the user-defined function. We also discussed the advantages of using function. So the main advantages of using function is code reusability. Code reusability means you can write the code once and you can use the same code at multiple places. Then we have discussed the syntax. What is the syntax or how you can write a function? We discuss access specifier, modifier, return type, function name, parameter list, right? So in this case, return type and function name is mandatory, whereas the parameter list is optional. If your function taking some input, then you need to pass parameter. If your function doesn't need any input from the user, then you do not need to define any parameter. So it is optional. Then access specifier and modifier. We have discussed these are two different things. Don't think that access specifier and modifier are same. Access specifier is basically to provide the accessibility. Who can access your method, right? The examples are public, private, protected, internal, private, internal, protected, internal, like this, right? And modifier means how you can access the method, right? If you are declaring the method as static, sir, can you explain the parameters of? See, okay. So coming to your point, parameters of a main method, right? If you look at the course overview, right? There is a concept called command line argument. So in my application, there is something called command line argument. At that time, I will explain you the main method parameter. Why the parameter is string argument, right? If you want to pass parameter to how you can pass parameter to the main method, at that time, I'm going to explain the main method parameters. Is that clear? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So everything. So whatever they are at the end of this basic chapter, now you will understand what is the main method is declared as public, right? Why it is static, what is the use of this string argument parameter that main method is taking, and how you are going to pass a string array to the main method, why it is string, why it is not other type. So everything I'm going to discuss, don't worry. Then we have discussed that the modifier means this is access specifier means the accessibility, where you can access the method. Modifier means how you can access the method, how you can access the method, and right. So in the sense what, now if you declare the method as static, then you can access the method by using the class name or directly. If you are not using static, then what happens? Now you have to create an object to access the method. Similarly, if we use partial, then the declaration is going to be in one place and its implementation is going to be in another place. That means the function is divided into two parts. One is declaration, one is its implementation. We will see that in practical, right? If you declare the virtual method as virtual, then you are giving the permission to the child classes. Hey, child classes, if you want, then you can override me, right? And if you are declaring shield means this class is not going to be overridden, or this class is not going to be, you can say it is not going to be overridden, right? So all these things we are going to discuss. And function body means whatever the logic you want to implement, that you can put inside the function body. The logic might be some complex operation, calculation, might be some API call, right? So most of the time you will see that we are calling some third-party API to get the data. For example, you are developing one application for online flight booking, right? For flight booking, you may be get data from some other APIs like Clevertrip, right? So what you will do? So you will call Clevertrip API. The Clevertrip API, the city will provide you the data, and that data you are going to use in your application. Or it might be possible that you are doing some online payment, right? Payment gateway. So from your code, you need to make a call to the third-party API, the payment gateway, whatever you are using, right? So you need to call to them. Even you can also perform some database like operations. Suppose you want to save some data in the database, accessibility, the database saving code, right? Whatever the code is required to store some data in the database, you can also write those data as part of the function body. After doing the operation, then it basically depend whether you want to return the data to the caller method or not. If you want to return some data, then you have to specify the return type. If you specify the return type as int, so after end of the method or somewhere in your method, you need to write a return statement. And that return statement is going to return some integer value. And when the return statement is executed, from that place, it will return to the caller method, right? So we have seen this example. So this return X means from here it will return, right? We have seen this example. This is the return type is void. And whenever your method is not going to return anything, then you need to specify the return type as void. Then we have discussed how to call a method, right? So we have discussed these are actual parameters or actual arguments. These are formal parameters, right? Or formal argument you can say. So whatever the value is there, X and Y, a copy of the X and Y will be passed and that will be set in the variable A and B. A and B are local variable to this method, right? And we have seen this is formal parameter, this is actual parameter. Whatever value you are passing, that will be set in the formal parameter. The parameter which is you are passing while calling the method is the actual parameter, and the parameter which is defined inside the method definition, those are going to be called as formal parameter. And we have discussed what is method signature, right? In method signature, it is consist of two things. One is method name and another is the number and list of parameters if it is taking. So these two consist of a method signature, but this int and static, these are not part of a method signature. Why it is not part of method signature? There is a concept called method overloading in C#. Once we discuss OOPS concept, there is something called method overloading. At that time, I will explain you what is method overloading, what is method signature in detail, why the return type is not considered as part of the method signature. We will discuss that time, right? Then we have discussed how the memory is allocated for your local variable, right? Whenever the main method is executed, a main method activation record area will be created inside the stack pointer. But before that, whenever you try to execute your application code, so the machine code of your application is first of all loaded into your main memory, right? There is something called code section in the main memory. In that code section, the machine code of your application is going to be loaded. And once the program execution starts, we know from where the program execution is going to start. So formal parameters are passed during method creation, while actual parameters are passed during method call. Yeah. So the formal parameter are not passed, right? So we are just defining the formal parameter while creating the method. Passed means what? Now, whenever we are passing some data from one method to another method, that is passing. Suppose I am giving you something, that means I am passing something to you. But if you are having something, then you are not passing that. So in this case, when we are calling, we are passing the data. That means formal parameter are nothing but a receiver end. They are going to receive the data which is passed while you are calling the method, right? So you cannot you consider that formal parameter are passed during method creation. No, you are not passing anything during method creation. You are just creating, right? While you are calling, at that time you are passing. For example, right, in this case, here we are not passing any data. It is just a creation. It is like a local variable, right? This is a local variable to this method. But while I am calling this method, I need to pass data. So whatever data I am passing, this is nothing but your actual parameter. Why actual parameter? This X and Y are actual parameter, right? They are actually holding the data. And why this A and B are called as formal parameter? Because whatever the value A and whatever the value A and B holding, we are just passing a copy of A and B. From here only, we are passing the data to this method. Here we are not passing any data. Here A and B only, They have to receive the data which is passed while calling the method. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we have discussed when the program execution is going to start from the main method. So when the execution start, a main method activation record area will be created, and whatever the local variable you have defined inside your main method, those are going to be created inside the main method's activation stack area. So here you can see 10, 15, 25 will be created. XY sum is the variable name, and they are going to. And whenever you call the add method, so the add method stack area, activation record area for the add method will be created inside the same stack memory. So you can see add activation record area, and this is also inside the stack memory. And here the local variable and the variable which you declared. So integer a and b are local variable to this method, and this sum is also local variable to this method. So you can see three variables are created inside the stack. So today we are going to continue our discussion. So now we will discuss, we have seen how to create a user defined function. Now we are going to see what are the different ways to create a user defined function. But before that, you just need to remember what is return statement. So return statement means this is the return statement. Whenever you want to return something from your method, then you need to write the return statement. Return statement, and whatever the data type you have mentioned in your method, you can return the same data using the return statement. And further, whenever the return statement is executed, the controller or the controller will come from that statement to the calling method. For example, suppose I am writing here some statement, right? Suppose I am writing some console.writeLine statement. See, this statement is not going to be used. Why? You can say already I'm getting one warning, unreachable code detected. Why this is? Because from this location only the controller moves to this location. That means this statement is never going to be executed. As this statement is never going to be executed and it is known to compiler, then he is giving you some warning that is unreachable code is detected. Right? So whenever the return statement is executed from, it will exit the method execution. So this method execution will exit, and from this location, whatever the data you have provided in the return statement, it will take those data and come back to the location where the method is being called. And whatever data you are returning, that you can store in the left hand side variable, but this is again optional. If you want, you can store the value. If you don't want, then you can don't store the value, right? So this is optional. I don't want to store the return data, no problem. If you want to store the data, then you can also store the data. Is that clear? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let us read the definition of a return statement. The return statement terminates the execution of a function immediately and return the control to the calling function. So this return statement in this case terminate the function execution immediately and return to this statement. Okay, let's see practically. See, program execution started. I'm pressing F10. I'm pressing F10. Now I want to go inside this method definition. What I need to press, F10 or F11?
F11, sir. F11.
F10 means next line. F11 go inside the function body. So I'm pressing F11. Coming to this place. So this statement is executed. This statement is executed. Please observe line number 21 is not going to be executed. See, directly it will come to the end of the method execution. That is line number 22. And from line number 22, it will come back and it will store the result in the sum variable. Now, can anybody tell me why I'm not getting error? Even the return type is mentioned integer. I am storing the data in the sum variable. Why I'm not getting any error?
Because like float is a bigger data type and integer is a small data type, so like it can store.
Yes. So float is a bigger data type, and you can store a smaller data type range value inside a bigger range data type value without any data loss. So in this case, no data loss. There is no data loss. That's why automatic typecasting is allowed by the compiler. But if there is a chance of a data loss, then it will give you some compilation error. Then in that case, you need to go for explicit casting. And we already know the different ways to implement the explicit casting. You can use cast operator, sometimes cast operator is not going to work if the data type are not compatible. Then in that case, you can use convert to class helper method, right? Convert to int, convert to string, right? Even you can use the parsing method, integer dot parse, integer dot traverse. Those options are also available, right? So the return statement terminates the execution of a function body immediately and returns the control to the calling function. Execution resumes in the calling function at the point immediately following the call. So the execution will continue from this method. So where you call, from there only the execution continues, right? A return statement can also return a value to the calling function. See, in this case, we are returning some value to the calling method. And even if you don't want to return any value, you can also use the return statement. For example, here I am using void. So if I'm using void, then I cannot store the data because it is not going to store any data, right? In this case, you cannot use return sum. You can simply use return. That is acceptable. What is the use? Now, when this return statement is executed, it will terminate the loop. It will terminate the function and it will come back to this location. But if you want, so return statement you can use in 2 ways. First of all, it will terminate the execution of the body. But if you want to return some data, you can also return some data like this. Understand or not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So without any data, you can also use return. So first of all, return statement will terminate the function execution. Second, you can use return statement to return some data. If your method is void, then you can also use the return statement. But in that case, you cannot return any data. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now we are going to discuss what are the different ways to create a function in system. See, in function, we can create a function in 4 different ways. We can create a function with no argument and no return type. So no parameter and no return type. No parameter and no return type. Right? So you can create a function in 4 ways. No parameter and no return type, with parameter and no return type, no parameter and with return type, and with parameter and with return type. Let us see the examples one by one and try to understand the code. So in this case, this method is going to be what? Does this method taking any parameter?
No,
Tell
sir.
me. No parameter.
No, sir.
Does this method returning anything?
No.
So that means no parameter and no return type. This is the first version of the method. So in this case, the method is not going to accept any parameter, nor the method is going to return anything. If you want to perform some calculation where you don't need to give some input to the function, and even you don't expect some output from the function, then you need to use this kind of a method. So in real time, what happened now? Sometimes when we are processing some data or whenever we are processing some record, at that time, so the process is going on the pending state. That means we are not getting confirmation whether the product placed successfully or not. In that case, what we have done, we generally do implement some kind of job in the sense that is going to be executed in the background, and in background it is going to check the database, right? And it will get the data and it will update the data. And in that case, we are not passing any type of input or any type of output. So it's an independent job which is going to be executed in the background, and the job functionality, it is not taking any input from the UI or user, or not it is returning any input or UI to the user. So in scenario like this, you need to go with this kind of function. So now, hello.
So but in this case, we get the output now. Like console.writeLine is will give us the output. So
see, here I'm talking about the return type as the output, right?
Okay.
So this console.writeLine statement is not the output. It is a logic of this function, right? You can consider it is the operation this function is going to perform. When I'm saying output or input means if I'm calling this method and if I'm getting some output from this method, that is said to be output. This
Okay.
console.writeLine statement is not the output statement. Yes, it is going to be print the output on the console window, but I'm not getting any output. If I'm calling this function, then from this main method is not getting any output from the some function, right? So it nor
Yeah.
it is passing some data. So in this
Yeah, sir.
case, it is independent. The sum of 10 and 20 is static. So this is one type of a function, no parameter and no return type. The second category is no argument passed but return a value. See, now, see, in this case, does this method taking any parameter?
No, sir.
No parameter. Does it returning something?
Yes, sir.
What value it is going to return?
Sum.
What value? Sum is the variable. What kind of a value it is going to return? By looking
Integer.
at the
Integer.
integer value, it is going to return. See, so in this case, I'm taking some, this method doesn't taking any input. So I'm declaring some variable, performing some calculation, and after performing the calculation, whatever the value stored in the sum variable that I am returning, right? So in this case, you can see, I'm just doing this kind of operation. So integer result equals to sum, whatever value sum is returning, that will be stored in the result variable. Even you can also do like this. So instead of storing the result, you can directly call the sum function here also, and it is also going to be accepted, right? Now let's run the application. See, sum is static, sum is static. So in this case, the result will be stored in the result variable, and in this case, the result is directly replaced here, right? So this is another kind of a function, method. So you can create a method without parameter but with the return type. Previously we have seen no parameter, no return type, and in this case no parameter but with the return type. This is another kind. So in this case the function doesn't taking any input from the user but is returning some value to you. Okay, you understand or not?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the third category of function is argument passed but no return value. Okay, so in this case you can consider the example. So I'm passing some data or not? This method is taking some parameter or not? This is with parameter but no return value. Yes or no? No return type means void. So in this case, this is another type of function where you can pass some data to the function, but you don't expect any output from the function. So in this case, it is going to perform the operation. After performing the operation, that's it. It is not going to return any data to you. So you can consider this is the example. So as it is not returning any type, so you cannot write any variable or like in this category because this method doesn't returning anything. See, cannot implicitly convert type void to int. So return type is void and you cannot convert the void return type to integer. So this is another category of functionality. Sum is static. And the last one is you can consider with parameter and with return type. Right? So this is the last category of the method where the method is taking some parameter and the method is returning some parameter, right? In this case, the method taking 2 parameter and the method returning 1 parameter. Is that clear? So these are the 4 different ways you can create a method in C# programming language. So method without parameter and without return type, method with parameter and with return type, method with parameter without return type, method without parameter and with return type. So these are the 4 different ways using which we can create a function in C#. function or method with no parameter, no return type, with parameter, no return type, no parameter, with return type, with parameter. Is that clear? This is not that important because generally you know all these things, right? I just give you an overview. Yeah, this is also possible in C#. This is possible in your other programming languages like C, C++, Java, or any kind of programming language you take into consideration. These four things are available in those programming language. Even the same thing is also available in C# programming language. Is that clear?